church during that time. But today I have a message that I've entitled Martha, Martha, and I think probably the title gives away, to some of you at least, what it's all about. It's talking about our busyness. Are you a Martha? I remember it was like yesterday, actually it was 1999. When I was speaking to some colleagues in the office, back in those days I was doing a very different job, but it was still the early days of the small mobile phone. Those of you old enough will remember the big brick phone, right? But, this was the days of, you could get a small mobile phone without an antenna. Amazing. And somebody in the office, as we were, adoring our new Nokia 3210s, said, I can't imagine why anyone would bother with this SMS option on the phone. Why would anybody send anyone else a message and be willing to pay 10 cents for it? Well, how much the world has changed in the space of 23 years. SMS, Messenger, Viber, WeChat, what else is there? Instagram, Twitter, WhatsApp, Signal, they keep going, don't they? The list of to-do communiques just goes on. And in my role, actually, I've learnt that some people respond if you send them, using this type of message. Other people respond if you send them this type of message. Other people respond with this type of message. Some people don't respond at all. But, you kind of have to know where people are at. But, it all keeps us very busy, doesn't it? Someone once said that if the devil can't get you to sin, he'll make you busy. We recently had a family holiday and staying at various locations throughout North New South Wales. This was on a Friday evening at a beach just north of Coffs Harbour. And, it probably wasn't until the second week in our holiday that I just learnt to let the phone calls go through to the keeper. And, if a person left a voicemail or sent me a message and, it was something more important, obviously I addressed it. But I figured, I wanted to have some quality time with family. And so it was a time that I learned to just let some things go. So whilst we were away, there wasn't just the three of us. There was 2 cars and there were 6 of us as a family. Geraldine's parents and auntie came along as well. We had this rule, no phones at the table, okay? When we were eating, no phones, because we found ourselves, on the first or second day or whatever, we sit down to eat somewhere and everybody gets out their phone and, this is not a holiday. So we made this rule, and our little Alana, our 5.5-year-old, turned out to be the rule enforcer. Because she's the one that's always wanting to grab the phone off mum and dad, right, and do something. So yes, we learned to rely less on our phones and just be more present and enjoy special moments together. Sometimes it takes a holiday to take stock, step back, check the direction of the wind and adjust our sails. Sometimes we get so caught up in our busyness, we come to think that things are normal, but they're not. And Jesus encountered such a moment when he was visiting Mary and Martha. Mary was listening while Martha was busy being a super hostess. And what did Jesus say to Martha? Do you remember? Martha, Martha, you are worried about and troubled about so many things. Could it be that if Jesus was to literally step into our lives today, into our homes today, he would say something very much the same? Could it be that if Jesus was to address the church today, or our culture, Christian culture even, he would say, Martha, Martha, why are you so busy? Could it be that many of us are spiritually, emotionally, and physically suffering today because we've forgotten the simple message that Jesus had for Martha? Honestly, most of us have so many multitasking, activities going on in our life that most likely the activities of the sister of Lazarus would pale into insignificance, wouldn't they? Into all the things that we try to take on, in comparison in our tech-induced busy world. And here in Australia, we've recently been faced with the prospect of, the potential of life without Google. Is that right? How would that look? My first thoughts were, bring it on. Let them go, Hasta la vista, big brother. Of course, we all know that an alternative would already be ready to spring up, right? It's just around the corner. Friends, we can't change the reality of the world that we're surrounded by, but we can change our corner of the world. We can slow down. And potentially, the situation that the world has found itself in is almost like a temporary pause or opportunity to do just that. Perhaps we need to undo Nike's tagline that we all know so well and increase the number of occasions where we can just say, just don't do it. Do you feel that you're free from our world of hurry? How can you tell if you've got hurry disease or busy disease? In John Mark Comer's book, it's called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. The author asks, have you ever moved from one supermarket checkout line to another because it looks faster? Have you ever counted the cars in front of you so that you can get in the fast lane as you're coming up to the lights? Yeah? Or maybe I can add to that, if it's a van driver or maybe a Volvo driver or a hat driver or something like that, Have you ever multitasked to the point of forgetting one of the tasks that you were doing? If you answered yes to those questions, and I answer yes to those. If you answer yes to those, then, we're all basically suffering hurry sickness. I know I do. And that's why I wanted to talk about this here today. Our busy, hurried lives cause us to be irritable, reckless workaholics. They cause our priorities to get messed up. And when we actually do find some downtime, we tend to practice addictive, escapist behaviours. Isn't that true? We recline back in the couch. In isolation from our loved ones, in isolation from God. And so in the process, we let slip on both our physical well-being, on our emotional and spiritual wholeness. Can anyone relate to that? It's no wonder that Jesus said in Matthew 11:28-30 here, come unto me, all you who labour and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. One thing we need to say from the outset regarding Martha, we're looking at Martha today. She was a believer, like us. She was a believer. Martha was a willing follower of Jesus, but her priorities were out of kilter. Martha was busy serving the Lord, and due to her busyness, she was losing out on time with the Lord. She was serving Jesus without taking time to know him. So, let's take a look. If you have your Bibles, open up to Luke chapter 10. And we're looking here at verses 38 to 42. Luke chapter 10, verses 38 to 42. Now it happened as they went that he entered a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. This is Jesus. And she had a sister called Mary, who also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she approached him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Therefore tell her to help me." And Jesus answered and said to her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things. But one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen that good part, which will not be taken away from her." I'm sure it's no coincidence that these few verses that I've just read here are actually sandwiched between two passages. The first passage there is, the preceding 12 verses or so, is the story that Jesus shares about the Good Samaritan. Here, Jesus shares that people are important, the way we relate to our neighbours. Who is my neighbour? Jesus explains how we need to relate to people around us. People are important. Jesus is all for practical service to people. Secondly, the passage that follows it, right after what we just read in Luke chapter 11, is the Lord's Prayer. And so that's dealing with how we relate to God. As the disciples recognized that something was special there in the life of Jesus, and they wanted to be his disciples, they too wanted to have that connectedness that Jesus had. So, let's come back to this passage, Luke 10, verses 38 to 42, with Jesus, Mary, and Martha. Verse 40. Martha was distracted with much serving. If we look at a few different translations here, we see Martha was busy with all the work that had to be done. Martha was distracted, as it says there. Martha was pulled away by all that she had to do. What was she being pulled away from? She was being pulled away from quality time with Jesus, right? Where were Martha's priorities? It's not that she was doing something wrong, true? She's never rebuked for what she's actually doing, but her priorities just need to be adjusted. Do you ever feel that your priorities need some tweaking, some adjusting? Just yesterday morning, as I received a few phone calls, probably because I just got back from holidays, I again let them go through to the keeper. It was first thing in the morning, and instead I decided to walk down the road to the shops with my daughter, and guess what? We held hands all the way. That's pretty good for a dad and a 5.5-year-old, isn't it? We held hands the whole way walking down to the shops, just chatting to get her favourite cereal that we'd run out of, Fruity Bix. You see, just a day earlier, she kind of threw away a comment. She says, "Dad's always using his phone." Red flag. Dad's always using his phone. So after I spent some quality time with her in the morning, and then I was heading out, it was 11 o'clock in the morning, and I knew that I wouldn't be home that night until 9 p.m. That's why I knew I had to spend some time with her in the morning. It warmed my heart when she said numerous times, not just once, numerous times, she said, "Daddy, I love you." She said, "Daddy, I'll miss you." And then she was blowing me kisses. I mean, what more does a dad want, right? Are you being pulled away from the most important things in life by the pressures of life? Make sure that God and family come first. Verse 39, Mary sat at the feet of Jesus. As we picture Mary quietly listening to the word, the teaching there of Jesus, right there at the feet of Jesus, we have this word picture. We can imagine that she has a sense of peace, right? Shalom, of tranquility. Mary's speechless testimony, because we don't hear Mary speak here. Mary's speechless testimony actually speaks volumes to our world, our anxious, hectic world that we live in today. And it's something that we're all privileged and able to experience ourselves, to be at the feet of Jesus. And my wife recently made contact with an old friend and discovered that she was extremely, extremely unsettled. She's not a, practicing believer. She has a faith in God, but she doesn't really, you wouldn't say that she practices her faith. Because of the current global situation, it turns out that she's really quite open to learning more about the Bible and understanding things that she doesn't understand, particularly as she recalled some of the things that my wife shared with her 10 years ago about things that would be happening in the end time, and she sees a lot of these things happening around us today. See, over the last 6 months, she had been researching and reading various bills of parliament from different countries, not just ours, different countries all over the world. She's been reading these things, and she's deeply concerned about the direction of our world, where we're heading, and how freedoms are being taken away from people. So, a week ago, we're on our holiday, we're driving the car, and I said to my wife, Geraldine, why don't you give your friend a call and see how she's going? When my wife was on the phone to this young mother, you could audibly hear the anxiety in her voice. She said, I'm not even being a good mother to my children because I'm so anxious. It's hard to imagine that people are out there suffering so much just looking at what's going on in the world. My wife told her to stop reading any more of this material that she's been getting on a daily basis that's causing her anxiety, and to promise her that she would read one psalm a day. She says, I don't have my Bible. And so my wife says, okay, no problem, I'll text you a chapter a day or send it to you through one of those myriad of different communiques that we talked about earlier. And so she's been doing that for the last week or a bit more. She agreed to do that. So each day she's been sending her something, and just the other day she sent her a video, actually, of a song of Psalm 91. Rather than reading the psalm, because she'd read that a few days earlier, she sent her the song. And, she's responded very positively. Time at the feet of Jesus changes things. Time at the feet of Jesus changes things. Is it something that you practice every day? Verse 41. We read there, Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things. Martha, I guess she expected a positive response from Jesus. She thought Jesus was going to back her up, to help her out, say, come on, Mary, get up and help your sister. But Jesus doesn't do that. Instead, Jesus speaks Martha's name twice. Martha, Martha. Sometimes the Lord needs to call out our names more than twice, doesn't he? 1,000 times before he gets our attention. Isn't that true? Martha, Martha, have you considered that there's something more important to be doing right now? Martha, Martha, you're so worked up over so many unimportant things. You're pulled in too many different directions. You're in a state of confusion. You're anxious about nothing. Martha, listen. The Lord is trying to get her full attention. And you can almost hear, in the intonation of Jesus' voice, Martha, Martha. An indication that Mary's choice is the more appropriate thing to be doing. And then Jesus points out what she needs to feel at ease. Verse 42, one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen that good part. Jesus does not criticize Martha, but he points out she's missing out on the most important thing. The one thing that nobody can take away from you. It is your time with Jesus, that solid foundation in the Lord. Being a disciple of Jesus requires us to even suspend ministry activities to ensure that we have adequate time with God. Try waking up to a stressful schedule. You know, we all have a to-do list, things to do each day. Try waking up to a stressful schedule and getting through. You know that there's going to be various hurdles, various problems, various roadblocks, etc. Try doing that without the Lord, and then try doing the same thing with the Lord. Is there a difference? For sure. Try it and see. One gives you high blood pressure and potentially ulcers, and the other makes you wonder, wow, how did that happen? How was God able to just, smooth the path and make me so much more productive or make things go so easily today? Martin Luther realised this 5 centuries ago when, the more difficulties he faced, he realised that he had to spend more time with God. One time he famously said, "I have so much to do today, I shall spend the first 3 hours in prayer." It's not something that most of us would naturally think to do. Time at the feet of Jesus before heading out. Early in my ministry, I read a book by HMS Richards. He was a radio evangelist, and he wrote this book, Feed My Sheep, in 1957. It's still a classic book for us in the Adventist Church. And I recall it brought a smile to my face when I read something to the effect of, he wrote back in 57, he says, "The curse of the modern pastor is the telephone." Imagine. This is back in the days of the old, pick the thing up and wind it up. The curse of the modern pastor is the telephone, he said. A year or so after I read this book, it was probably around 2005, as technology was abounding, and I juggled between my Palm Centro. Anyone old enough to remember the Palms? No? Back in the days of pocket computers, and, the Palm was before the iPhone. This is not that long ago. I was juggling this Palm Centro. It's more like my smartphone and my computer all in one sort of thing. And then I had on my dashboard, my digital UBD, the sat-nav, which I'd paid an exorbitant amount for. And, people's cars were being broken into back then to steal these things. But, juggling between these two while driving, it was still legal to do that back then. And I couldn't see myself in the mirror, see what I was doing, the crazy things you do. Even though at the time I remember feeling agitated by other people when they were constantly on their Blackberries. Do you remember the BlackBerry? Another form of smartphone, I guess. Was the person at the other end of the BlackBerry more important than what was going here, I wondered? Today, 15 years later, the Palm and the BlackBerry, they're gone and obsolete. But HMS Richards, he probably had no idea at the time of writing his book in 1957 how the humble telephone would continue to grow in its reach and impact in the decades to come on our busy lives. An impact that extends beyond a mere conversation or a moment of our time, but rather it can engulf our entire rhythm of life and cloud our perspective with a negative impact on our relationships with each other, on our physical well-being, on our productivity, on our creativity, and of course on our connectedness with God and with each other. A negative impact on being effective disciples of Jesus. So, what is your life perspective? What direction is your life taking? What's taking up your time? What are your priorities in life? A scribe once came to Jesus and asked him a question in Mark chapter 12. If you have your Bibles, open up to Mark chapter 12 and verse 28 to 31. Mark 12, 28 to 31. Then one of the scribes came, and having heard them reasoning together, perceiving that he had answered them well, asked him, "Which is the first commandment of all?" Jesus answered him, "The first of all the commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength." This is the first commandment. And the second, like it, is this: you shall love your neighbour as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. These are the two things that were sandwiched on either side of this conversation with Mary and Martha. Love for God and love for humanity. God and people. You know, it is said that the average user in the West unlocks their phone, and I just did it up here before during our offering collection, because I do the offering online now. We don't collect the offering bag because of the pandemic, etc. We've got the box up the back there if people want to give their tithes and offerings, etc. But a lot of you, I know, just give online now. And so, I remember, okay, I go into the app, I do it. But, the average user unlocks their smartphone today 7 or 8 times every hour. And it is estimated that they touch their phone 2,500 times every day. I guess that includes every letter typed and every picture swiped. Imagine if you were to significantly reduce that and instead connect with God. When you're waiting in that line at the supermarket thinking, is there a shorter line? Rather than get the phone out and check the latest news or check what's on the Facebook or on the Instagram, maybe you could read a chapter of the Bible. Wow, that's a novel thought. Use your time wisely. Imagine reducing your time with things that waste our time and connect with God, and then in turn be able to connect with others. Love God and love people. Perhaps we need to turn our smartphones into dumb phones. Try it. Turn off the Wi-Fi, turn off the data, turn off the alerts for a week and see how it goes. Actually, I've since my daughter was born, because, I guess being an older parent, I think maybe it doesn't affect people when they have kids when they're really young, but, becoming a parent in your 40s is like it totally throws your world upside down. And so I remember just putting my phone on silent about 3 months after she was born, and I've never turned it back on. My phone's just permanently on silent. And so sometimes I miss calls, but sometimes when it calls, my watch will vibrate. And so I know, if it's something important, obviously I'll get it. Sometimes I don't have my phone on me and I can still get it through the watch, but, it's not continually going bing, bing, or ringing or doing whatever, So we need to turn things off. I'd be willing to give it a shot, turn everything off for a week or so. I'm old enough to remember that we got by in life quite okay without it. Do you remember that? Sin and busyness, they have the same effect. They cut off your connection with God. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So, some suggestions for unhurrying our lives, okay? 4 suggestions here. First of all, practice a time of silence and solitude. If we neglect this in life, we'll just be sucked into the rat race every time. Have a time where you set aside, where you don't have any distractions. Time where you can just do nothing and listen. Secondly, maximize God's Sabbath blessings. Sabbath is meant to be a blessing, so stop. Remember, Jesus came to set the captives free. Sabbath is a blessing He's given to all of us to just stop. And so Sabbath should be a time where we can stop and reconnect with the things that are actually important in life. Thirdly, try some simplicity. Learn to be content with what you have. Try giving some stuff away. We probably all have too much stuff, don't we? Rather than being caught up in the consumeristic, treadmill, we need to just be generous and give some things away. And the fourth one is pretty obvious, isn't it? Slow down. Think about turning up early and just relaxing rather than rush and just be right on time. Take the slow checkout lane and have a conversation with a fellow human being. Don't forget to put your mask on. Now, please don't misunderstand me. There is much to do. And yes, there are times when we need to work. There are times when we need to work hard. There are times when we need to work fast. I think we all get that, right? But if we want to serve Jesus as effective disciples, we need to have a full cup. We need to take time to be filled. We need the Holy Spirit, not just our know-how, not just our cleverness, but we need the Holy Spirit in order to impact people around us. And so unfortunately, when we get busy, often the first thing that tends to slip is our time with the Lord. Despite the suffering, and we acknowledge the suffering and loss of millions of people through this COVID-19 pandemic, I think it's actually been an opportunity at this time in Earth's history to observe what's going on in the world, to step back, to gauge where the wind is blowing, to adjust our sails and to set a new course and make the Lord the number one priority in our lives. Stay the course. We need to experience Jesus and His grace in our lives daily in order to get to our end goal destination. As the children's song goes, and I only just learnt this song in the last couple of months because my daughter started singing. I've never heard it before. She sings, "Sailing, sailing home, sailing, sailing home." Anyone know that song? No? With Christ in the vessel, we can smile at the storm, smile at the storm, smile at the storm. With Christ in the vessel, we can smile at the storm as we're gone sailing home. Friends, perhaps the Lord is trying to get your attention. Every one of you is here for a reason today. Perhaps the Lord is trying to get your attention. Martha, Martha, make time to connect with me. Have you been listening through the noise? Jesus said to His disciples, "Follow me." Where will we follow? Will we follow the world's example or will we follow the call of Jesus? Friends, what's taking up your time? The Apostle Paul said in Ephesians chapter 5, verses 15-16, "See that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the what? Redeeming the time, because the days are evil." Make sure that you use your time wisely, not as a foolish person, but as a wise person. And whatever it might be that's crowding out your time, make a decision today. Make a decision to prioritize and make time for Jesus in your life in 2021. Because at the end of the day, that's really what matters. Just do it and set your course for eternity. God bless.